Hi, Ann and Joe. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to get to learn more of your story, learn more about Hallie Grace. Everyone has heard us talk about you guys a lot, but I don't know how many people actually know your full story. And so I thought it would be really cool to just ask you questions and have everybody get a chance to hear it and ask questions for you too.
Sure.
You're a little bit of like EB celebrities in
No.
EB world. So I know Hannah always says like, oh, I'm an influencer. That seems so weird, but you are too.
Oh, we're nowhere near Hannah, but yes. I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
hopefully the EB community knows us for positive reasons, which we'll talk about.
yes.
later. Yes.
So let's kick it off with, if you could just tell us about Hallie. Tell us about birth. What was that like, and how did you get her diagnosis?
Yeah. I'm assuming I'm going to do most of the talking, but Joe is welcome to jump in at any point.
That's usually how it goes.
That is usually how it goes. But also I wanted to just make a point that dads matter too. And so we specifically all invited Joe here because his perspective is important. Okay, so Hallie. So Hallie is our middle child. So we had Brielle in 2019, and she was perfect in every way, just like all of our children. And we had no idea that anything could potentially be wrong in our genetic code, right? We didn't know we had any mutations of anything. So we were originally going to have just one kid. We loved her so much that we decided to just kind of leave it up to God and see if we would have another one. And I think within 2 months after that, it was when Brielle turned 1. And then about 2 months later, we were pregnant again, which I really thought was going to be a little boy. We had our heart set on a little boy at that point. Like I just had this feeling we were going to name him Noah. It was a whole thing. And then we were going to be team green because we thought, so I always wanted a little girl. So the fact that we had Brielle already, I was like, I'm just comfortable being team green. We'll get the surprise. But we are older parents. And so we had to have the genetic screening that they do, which by the way, does not include EB. So we got the genetic screening when it was time and everything came back normal, but they accidentally left the sex of the baby in my chart. So when I was scrolling, all of a sudden, whoa, big surprise, we're having a girl. And I had definitely an adjustment period.
Yeah.
But then we got super behind having 2 sisters, being girl parents. I bought matching outfits. We were so excited for them to grow up together. And pregnancy was great. It was actually my best pregnancy. I felt the healthiest ever. Brielle about killed me, but Hallie was very easy. Other than she kicked me a lot. She was very active in there. So we expected everything to be fine. I will say every single time we had an appointment though, I had like a gut nervousness, which he was like, why are you nervous? Like everything keeps coming back perfect. I was like, I don't know. And I just had this like fear about it, but we'd go in and every ultrasound, they'd be like, everything looks great. She's developing perfectly, blah, blah, blah. And so then I was going to actually try and have what's called a VBAC, which is vaginal birth after C-section. And so we were doing all the things. She was head down. We were ready to go. But she did not want to come out that way. And so because of my age, they were like, no, we're just going to have to force a C-section at this point. So she was full term. I mean, we pushed it and then had a C-section, and it was a fabulous C-section, if you can say that. I had the best team, anesthesiologist. We played all the music I wanted. It went way better than the first because I had a better idea of what to expect and birth plan and all that. So all of that leading up to that was.
Well, there was one
unless
exception.
I missed something.
Yeah, there's one exception. So, Anne is a big believer in signs, and so when we got to the hospital, the front entrance was closed for remodeling, and we didn't know that, and so we had to walk all the way around to the back of the hospital, which was the emergency room entrance.
And I got really nervous.
We were very nervous, and she asked the question, is this a bad omen?
I did. I forgot about that.
Yes. Obviously, I said no. But I just found, looking back on that,
Yeah, I totally forgot that part.
That was actually like a very weird sign.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So anyway, so then Hallie came out. It was a clear drape. They held her up, and I have the most beautiful photo that the anesthesiologist took, because the instant I saw her, I actually gasped. Like, I put my hand over my mouth. They didn't strap my hands this one, which is, anyone wondering, don't let them do that if you can help it. But I put my hand over my mouth and gasped because I felt like I had known her before. I can't describe it any other way other than it was like our souls were reuniting. And with Brielle, I had the most surreal, I'm a mom, I love this little being, like, you know, the things that you hear about, instant love with her. I just couldn't believe it. I was so overwhelmed. With Hallie, it was like a knowing of her. It was so bizarre. I've never experienced it before or since. And so I was just head over heels for her. And they took her to clean her off and do all the measurements and all that stuff. And it was taking a while. And so I remember calling out, is everything okay? Joe, is everything okay? You know, like, hello. And he said, yes, but it didn't sound quite right.
Yeah.
So Joe, from your perspective, then
Yeah.
what was happening?
So I saw she came out with I always get the wrong leg, blister on her left upper thigh.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a blister around her belly button,
umbilical cord,
and then her fingernails were long and turned backwards,
like bent.
Yeah, just long and turned, and so all of those things Brielle didn't have. So I'm nervous. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm looking at. No one's telling me anything, and I don't want to ask.
She also had a little bit of trouble breathing, right?
Brielle did. I don't remember that.
You told me later that she did, but
maybe that's right.
It wasn't enough.
No, so the breathing part was also, but I was really concerned about what I was physically seeing on her. But then I tried to tell myself, okay, well, this is only my second kid. I'm not an expert. Maybe this is something that happens sometimes. But in my gut, this didn't seem right. And one of the first things that came across my mind was, oh my gosh, my life as a dad and a parent is now like over, because I just felt there was something, I felt that there was something going on to where my life was no longer going to be the same anymore.
Wow. It's crazy that both of you had that kind of weird omen that day at different times, but
like a foreboding, like something wasn't, it was like a gut. I mean, we just knew. And so it still took a while, and I was getting very impatient. And finally, I think you came over to me and said, or someone came over. I don't remember. It was a blur, but someone came over and said, she has a couple blisters. She probably was just sucking on her fingers in the womb. We're going to just take her to the NICU to figure everything out, blah, blah, blah. And of course that like panic set in. And so I said, can I at least see her? Like, I haven't even seen my child. Can I see her? And so they brought her over. I think you carried her over, and she was wrapped up with her little hat with the bow. And we got, I think, one picture of us and then me with her, and I got to kiss her cheek, and then she was like whisked away. And I sent you with her, right?
I think I stayed with you. They wouldn't let me go.
Oh, that's right. So he stayed with me. So then I had to be closed up, which was like the longest 40-something minutes of my life. And when you have a C-section, you have a spinal most of the time. And so I had to wait 12 hours for that to wear off before I could even get out of the bed. And when it wears off, they make you go to the bathroom to make sure everything's working. And I just remember it was like 2 or 3 in the morning when this happened. They allowed us to see her through an iPad. So like there was a camera.
So well before that.
I know. I was getting to that.
Oh, okay.
So we went to recovery. We saw her in like through the iPad. And then the neonatologist came in. And so this was about an hour after birth. And I don't know about you, but I remember her face. I'll probably remember her face for the rest of my life.
No.
You don't? Do you remember hearing the words?
Vaguely. Because I did, yeah.
Okay. I remember it. She came in and just said, and she was so nice. She was so lovely. And she came in and she said, well, you know, there's some blistering going on. Not really sure what's going on, but we think it might be something called epidermolysis bullosa. And the way she said it conveyed like it might not be a big deal, but I could just see it in her eyes that it might very well be a big deal. And so I didn't know what to think about it. I think we tried to ask a couple of questions, but I'm like just out of surgery. And I remember her saying something like, well, it can cause blistering of the skin. There's a lot of different types. Like there was just a lot of information flying at us. And so, you know, we're going to keep her in the NICU, and we'll let you know more information when we have it. Obviously, whenever you're ready, you can come see her, that kind of thing. And so then that's when we had to wait. And you went to see her before I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your first experience of her like? Because I wasn't there.
So I don't remember because all of it is just I remember mostly crying in the hotel, in the hospital room. Like I just remember like crying all the time.
So you're saying though that you got her potential diagnosis before you even really got to spend time with her?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just based on her her presentation. So
well, and our hospital had seen 2 babies with EB, which is very rare.
Right.
And we have since actually encountered those families, which we can talk about. But those families, I think, actually set Hallie up the best possible way.
Yes.
Because most of the time they don't know. So
when I went down there, they had her under a heat lamp. They had Mepilex on her to monitor her heart. They had it on her chest. You know, they didn't do the little wrap on the foot for.
Yeah, they were avoiding adhesive.
Yeah, so they knew that they had Mepilex on her and everything, and a heat lamp to keep her uncovered. And I remember holding her, and I did chest to chest with her, and I also remember like being scared of my own kid, which is a terrible thing. But the fingernails just really creeped me out, and I really hate even saying that. But I was.
They were really scary looking.
Yeah, and I was scared to hold her, and because there was just so much about what was going on that I just didn't know.
Yeah, I think that's normal.
I think that's normal too.
Yeah.
And I think that this is important for I'm excited to be able to share this on our page later for other parents to be able to hear this so they don't feel guilty for having the exact same thoughts, because I can assure you, you are not the only one who has thought that. And I know because I talked to Hannah that Eliana her nails were like all the way out here when she was born. And it was like, she'd mentioned that the nurses kept coming in like, oh my God, look at these nails. Oh my God, look at these nails. And like her daughter was like the freak show of the hospital. So you're definitely not the only one with that kind of story. So it will be beneficial for other parents to hear that they felt the same way, you know?
Yeah. That is hard. It's just hard when anything isn't what you expect.
Yeah.
When you're having a baby. I mean, having a baby is scary in general, right? I mean, it's like a whole big life change, and you are suddenly in charge of a person that you have created together. And when it's not 100% what you expect, you're like, there's a lot of guilt and blame and really awful thoughts that go through your head. So around 2 or 3 in the morning is when I finally had my spinal wear off, and the nurse told me that I went to the bathroom faster than she's ever seen anyone go to the bathroom afterwards. And I think we went straight to the NICU. And I instantly wanted to hold her, but I had similar thoughts. I mean, Joe isn't alone even in our family. I remember being like weirded out by her nails, but also just afraid to hurt her. She just seemed like a glass doll. And, you know, babies, whenever you have them, they're just so tiny and, you know, whatever. But like this was like, oh my God, like I could hurt her skin, or I don't know what's going on. And I think at that point they had actually applied Vaseline all over her body. So she also was slick.
Yeah.
You know, gosh, there was just a lot. I did get to try nursing, and she did latch. So throughout her life, I think she latched maybe 3 total times, but those were really special moments for me. I got to sing to her. I think we were up till like 4 or 5 that morning. Like we stayed up there for like several hours until my eyes couldn't stay open anymore. I did not want to leave her. There was a lot of tears. The nurses in the NICU were absolute angels, as is probably most places. I mean, it takes just a special type of person to do that. We actually have remained friends with a couple of them. But I remember crying to one and asking if my baby was going to die right off the bat. And then having multiple panic attacks, like full on.
What did the nurse say to you when you asked that question?
She said, absolutely not. We're going to do everything we can. Everything she should have said. Obviously, there's no way for them to know,
Right.
but, you know, she did her best to comfort me. She gave me a hug. She said, what a great job at parenting I was doing. I'm such a good mom. Like, she was just so, I can still like see her in my head. Like, I can picture the whole interaction. And so we were there for a couple of days. They actually let us stay an extra day to be there with Hallie while she was still at the hospital here in Savannah. And then they offered us a transfer to either Atlanta or Charleston because they have an actual pediatric dermatology team at both of those places. We requested Charleston, which in some ways made it a little bit harder because we had to go across state lines, but it was just closer and his parents lived there. So we knew we had babysitters for Brielle and we had a place to stay. We could go back and forth between the hospital. So when she was about 3 days old, I think 2 or 3 days old, I'm pretty sure it was 3 days old, they had a team put together and they actually did a medical ambulance transport where they brought her to our room in this huge incubator. I mean, it was massive and scary. And there were, I think 3 people that went, but the 2 specific nurses we actually have stayed in touch with. And that actually will make me cry more than anything because they were such incredible people. They pulled her out of the incubator, took pictures of us, let us hold her, snuggle her, say all the things we needed to her. We were able to tell them whatever we needed to. They prayed over us. I mean, angels, like literally, they were incredible. Because we had to let our baby go in a transport without us. And that's one of the hardest things. There's a lot more to come, but, so she went to Charleston and it was an excellent NICU and she was there for another 5 days.
Yeah.
And so we went up and stayed with his parents and there was only one night that we didn't see her. And it was a Wednesday. Still remember this. It was a Wednesday night. And we were going to get up and leave the next morning, but actually called the NICU and the nurse on the other end of the phone said Hallie was crying. And so she put the phone up to Hallie and I talked to her and she said it was the first time she had calmed when she heard my voice, which was amazing. Hallie and I were very, very connected. So we ended up going up there and they had done so many things for us. She had this amazing room all to herself. They had made a little sign with 2 owls on it to show Brielle and Hallie as sisters. I will say it was a really interesting experience because with her skin, you had to layer up like 8 layers to even walk in the room. So we're talking like shoe covers, gloves, gown, hat, goggles. You had to Vaseline everything. If you were going to hold her, she was on like a pee pad that had been Vaselined. You were not skin to skin with your child because of risk of infection and, you know, tearing of skin and all that stuff. So it was just there was like a whole thing of rules listed on the door for everyone who came in. That was scary. I felt like I was in a weird movie, like a horror film. And there are several pictures that we have where we're holding her and it's literally just layers upon layers between us and our child. And then she was there for a while. She ate like a champ. In fact, they joked that she was eating more than all the other babies in the NICU combined. And and I was pumping for her, and she was taking a lot of that. I couldn't quite keep up, so we were supplementing with formula to make sure she was getting a lot of calories. She was doing really well. And that was where we met her main doctor, Dr. Laura Wineley, who is now family, and got us through the hardest days of our lives. She taught us how to be nurses. I remember the first time I had to pop a blister and thinking, I can't do this. I went into psychology so I wouldn't have to do medical stuff. Like, that's not my thing. But it's really different when it's your kid. You do whatever you have to do. Yeah. So there, at that point, there was really no reason for them to keep her. They had done genetic testing. We were just waiting on the results. But she was eating great. They taught us how to care for her, and there was no real reason to hold her. And so about at 8 days old, we got to take her home.
So by this point, you said they had done genetic testing. You don't have results yet, but are you aware of the different types? Like, are you aware of what you're waiting on, really?
Yeah.
So most people that have a story like ours will tell you that when it comes out that it's anything potentially EB, the very first thing you hear is don't Google it.
Right.
Which is insane, because what is the first thing you're going to do?
Google.
Google. I had posted on Facebook groups asking for prayers, and actually met a couple of EB moms that way that, again, have become family over the years. And then lots of people prayed. We had thousands of people praying for her. But we Googled it, and I think that's probably what started some of my panic attacks.
Yeah.
Just thinking about what it could be. But then Dr. Wineley said, she looked like a mild presentation. We were hoping for simplex, which, just as anecdotally, I've heard a lot of junctional families say that was their experience as well. So junctional babies do tend to come out, in my estimation, as a little bit more mild appearing, and then go downhill quicker. So we were fully expecting, at least logically, fully expecting mild simplex, even simplex generalized severe, like just something that wasn't terminal necessarily. But I don't know about Joe, but I kind of always still had like a knot in my stomach. I wasn't able to just relax at that, because it didn't feel right.
I didn't Google anything, so I didn't have any knowledge of what was going on other than what was being told to me. So I was optimistic that it was going to be. I was trusting the doctor. I was at this point, because I didn't know any different.
And hoping she was right.
And so I was hopeful.
So yeah, so we took her home, and she got to meet Brielle, and Brielle made her a little welcome sign, and loved her from the get. Brielle, I should just say, is a little diva, spirited child. You've met her, and so we were a little concerned about how she was going to do having somebody else in the house to care for, especially a very fragile baby. But she was absolutely fabulous with her.
She was.
I mean, she knew not to do anything rough. She was so gentle. She would help with feeding. She was scared to hold her, which is something that I think will always eat at me, because we don't have any official pictures of her holding Hallie, but we'd bring us diapers and talk to her and read to her. And, she was only 2 and 3 months at the time, so she was still itty bitty herself. But it was a good acclimation period in terms of the kids, the cats as well. Although Hallie had quite a few cat hairs stuck in her aquaphor.
I bet.
Poor thing. She was quite intrigued by the cats, actually, but she did well. I mean, we had her home basically most of her life until the very end. We went back and forth, trial and error a lot with bandage changes. I think the hardest parts were diaper changes took up to an hour, even with the 2 of us. And if you think about how often a baby is going, I mean,
can you explain more about why it takes an hour? Because for those of us who have never dealt with this before, a diaper change takes 15 seconds. So what could possibly take an hour. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so so diapers are elastic, and so the elastic is what keeps everything in the diaper instead of just like leaking out. And so the elastic causes damage. Also, the diaper itself, just being that close to the body
and hot,
causes friction and irritation and skin breakage. So every time we go to change her diaper, she's got wounds all over her butt and on her thighs. And so we have to treat those wounds every time. We've got to prep them. So I'm taking strips of, we went through various
phases,
various iterations of trying to do a diaper change that would be gentle on her skin, from like getting these bamboo diaper inserts that lasted a few days to using
flannel. No,
fleece, cutting strips of fleece and lining those with Aquaphor to put around her waist and her thighs before the diaper comes up, and then it ended up
disposable medical napkins.
Disposable medical napkins. Those things were great. But
those
slather those things
fabulous.
up with. So anyway, so I'm cutting sheets of fabric, slathering them up with Aquaphor, and over there, popping any blisters, cleaning any of the wounds, lathering her,
rewrapping,
lathering her up,
and she's kicking,
right?
She's, she's a baby.
Yeah,
so
babies move.
Right. So someone's holding her legs up while the other person's sliding the diaper down
very gently.
And then we've got to very carefully and strategically place these other bandages, so to speak, in the diaper, and then quickly get her diaper wrapped up so that she doesn't
at least
kick,
4 hands.
Right. So she doesn't kick and it slides all out.
Yes.
And eventually got to a point where she could do a diaper change by herself.
I could, but it took me at least 30 minutes, and that was towards the end.
Yeah, that was I couldn't do it.
It was rough.
So hard.
It was rough. And that's just the diaper changes.
Yeah.
You also had to do bandage changes.
Did anybody teach you how to do these things? I mean, did you learn these in the hospital, or was this like trial and error, just trying to figure it out?
So Dr. Winley had told us about the fleece because another one of her patients had used it in the past. And so like we got suggestions, but what we were always told is that every EB baby is different, which is true, by the way. Just over our years of getting to know the community, what works for one baby does not necessarily work for another. And so one of the hardest parts about this is that some of your trials become errors. And when you have an error, it creates a wound. And sometimes that wound doesn't heal. There were other times too, just even like, you have a needle or a little thing of scissors, like tiny surgical scissors using to pop the blisters, and she'd kick and it would just slice through her.
Even your fingernail.
My fingernail at one point, I had to keep my fingernails super short because, it could just, and it's like in the middle of a wound already, and you're trying to avoid infection, and she's crying, and you just feel like you've been punched in the gut. You feel like the worst parent. There were times during both diaper changes and wound care was hours. But when we would do either, that one or both of us would scream at the air or throw something at a wall or have to walk away. I mean, it was obviously to where she was safe. Somebody was watching her, but it was just one of the most stressful, emotional, I don't even have words for how hard it is to hurt your child to make them better. That's like traumatic is the word.
I've heard parents say that they disassociate during the diaper change. Like there's no other way to. Yeah, I can't.
Because it's like your kid is screaming and like
even with the wound care, and I mean, and that's just with Hallie being just a few months old, not to mention, I mean, all the
kids,
like
as they get older and they know,
and you know more, and and they're literally fighting you because it hurts them so bad. That's insane.
So now would be a good time to talk about pain management. What do you do? I've heard of that some babies are on morphine. I've heard other people say we just did Tylenol. I've heard people say ketamine. What do you do?
So, okay. first we should say when we got her genetic results, which was July 5th of 2021. So that it's coming up in a couple of days as an anniversary. That was a big day for us because that was essentially the day we found out that she was likely not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
I say that though because her genes, and this happens often, specifically with junctional, I've heard. So junctional is 2 separate mutations. So Joe has a mutation, I have a mutation, and she inherited both, right? My mutation is one that is seen both in junctional severe and junctional intermediate. So we didn't know which way it was going to go. And his mutation had never been documented before. So we didn't know which way it was going to go. So with all of that, I think it was just hard to kind of figure out life planning. Right. And so we actually got her into the EB clinic at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia at the end of August, and got her to see a bajillion people, including pain management and palliative care and all of that. I think we saw like 9 doctors in a 4-hour span, which is fabulous that they do that because you're in one room and the doctors come to you and it's amazing. But I remember the pain management guy walking a fine line with us because everybody wants to believe that she's going to live as long as she possibly can. And we still don't know for sure that it's severe. And so we stuck with Tylenol and sugar water because he didn't want to damage her organs at that point. And we always knew that we could eventually move on to morphine. We had talked about it. But Hallie also was very stoic. She was a very stoic baby. And so she did not cry.
It was hard to tell if she was in pain.
Yes.
And there was no way she couldn't be.
Oh, there was no. And eventually, towards the end, which we'll talk about later, she was in a lot of pain. I mean, it was very obvious at the very end, but she held it very tight to her chest for a while. And so we chose to just go Tylenol and sugar water. And that is actually a huge regret. Obviously, we didn't know, but it creates a lot of guilt because I don't know how much pain she was experiencing. And knowing now that she was never going to survive, I would have done anything going back to just make her comfortable. And I just pray every day that somehow she didn't feel as bad as it looked. And I know why we made the decision that we did. And I know that we were fighting for her life. I think with EB in general, but specifically junctional babies, especially if you don't know which direction it's going to go or it's at all confusing, there's a lot of decisions to be made. And either way, you're going to have what ifs and regrets, and you're kind of screwed, to be honest. And so, because you can choose to fight every second of every day for them and prolong life. And we were just thinking, gosh, if we could get her to be 5 years old, maybe they'd come out with a cure by then. Like it was like, a race against time on our end. And then you could also do what a lot of families that we know have chosen to do, which is hospice care and basically just make them comfortable until they pass. And if I could turn back the clock, I would have made a different choice. That doesn't mean that fighting every second of the day for them is the wrong choice, because it is sometimes all you know, and every family gets to make that decision for themselves.
There's a family that was on a call on a few months back where they were being told to just put the baby on hospice, and they said, no, we're going to fight. And what their decisions they made gave a few more extra months with their child, and they were super happy with that result because they got more time with them. And even though they were being pushed in another direction,
it's just, I think all options need to be laid on the table for these families so that everybody can make an informed decision. And I think everybody's intentions, at least in our journey, were so well-meaning. And it's such a tough thing to deal with, even as a provider. Like, I just think about you're having to have these conversations with a family about potentially losing their baby, their infant child, and everybody just wants to make us feel comfortable, but also tell us honestly. And we're trying to make decisions. And so, like, there was just a lot that went into it and a lot of questions of what could we have done better or different. ultimately, what we now know is that Hallie was not going to make it. And I think even Hallie knew that. We've talked to her doctors, and they've given us so much peace and comfort about our decisions. And they know that everything that we did was done in love for her. And we cling to that. And what they have told us is any decision otherwise would have not saved her. It would have prolonged it potentially. No one can know, but it would not have saved her. She was not going to live more than a year or two max, period. And that's just something that takes a lot to accept.
Yeah. I think for me, I think about like, well, I can't say the past 3 months because the past 3 months have been a whirlwind, but any other stretch of 3 months of my life, even 3 months of my children's lives, like the first 3 months that they were alive, and it's all just a blur. So to me, it's amazing that you guys, I mean, you've had no other choice, but you only got 3 months with your daughter, and it feels like you remember those emotions and those like details so clearly that it blows my mind. Of course, that's the only time you had with her, but like I can't remember the first 3 months of my son's life. I don't know what I was doing.
I don't remember the first 3 months of Brielle's. I don't remember all the stuff that she did, but yeah, with
not even Evan's.
No,
and he's more recent.
Right.
No, I think Hallie was just interesting. So one thing I will say about her is that she was much more present than most kids that age. So Brielle and Evan were like bump on a log for the first 3 months, right?
Most infants at that age are.
Yeah, they just are like, they're cute, but they don't like do much. I mean, you might get like a smile around 5 weeks or something, but you just don't like, they don't show that much personality. I think she knew she had to force everything to go quickly because she didn't have a whole lot of time. And so we got to, at least I'm not going to speak for you, but I think he feels the same way. I feel that we got to see a lot of who she was very fast. She showed so much personality. We lovingly called her Judgy Baby because she literally judged everything around her with a furrowed brow. But then also would smile the biggest smiles and look into your soul with her eyes. She just was so mature for her age. I don't know. I mean, she even got 2 teeth by the time she was 2 months old.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, like popped out bottom teeth.
She was living life to the fullest. I mean, she could have probably skipped the hard teething phase.
I know. Like, girl, why would you choose that?
Yeah, that.
But yeah, we got to know her very well, very quickly. And because it was the only time we had with her, I think we've just both, and because it was so traumatic, I think it just became like those, flashbulb memories that you ingrain so deeply in your brain.
So if you're okay talking about it, let's fast forward to 3 months. You've had her for 3 months. I know you've said in the past, thankfully, she didn't have to spend much time in the hospital like a lot of EB warriors do throughout their lives. So she was there for her NICU stay for 8 days, and then she came home, and she was pretty much home until the very end. So what happened?
So we're not entirely sure, but we have a pretty good idea of what happened. Yeah. Basically, it started September 4th. She passed September 8th, if that gives you. So we had 4 days at the end where things went downhill very quickly. It helped the whole time we had her that Dr. Winley gave us her number, her direct contact. We could message her pictures. She had a lot of doctor's appointments in Philadelphia, here, Charleston. Like, she was seen by a lot of people. So just because she wasn't in the hospital doesn't mean that we weren't doing a lot of medical care for her. But we did get to have her in the house, which was special and more rare than I wish it was. So then it was a Saturday or Sunday. It must have been a Saturday night when this all started.
Yeah.
Because I remember a Georgia Bulldogs game was playing.
Oh, yeah, they're playing Clemson.
Yeah. And she started making these movements that looked like seizures to me. Her whole body would tense up, and she would just make this ugly face, like, like she was almost like, I don't know, grunting and pain. I didn't know if it was pain. I didn't know if we were having seizures. And of course, I start Googling things because I think that Dr. Google is whatever, and it's not. Don't do that. It's not good. But I found stuff about infantile spasms, which is also potentially a really serious thing. And so then I went, down the rabbit hole and started telling Joe that now she has something else that's fatal and this is going to be horrible and we have to get her to the ER. And so we took her to the ER that night. I don't think we brought Brielle. I don't even know where Brielle was. Somehow she was safe. I have no, maybe with my parents. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember either. But I mean,
some of it is a blur. But we took her to the ER and it was late. And I remember that ER doctor came in and said that she didn't think it was infantile spasms. I had a video that I showed her and she didn't think it was that, but she wanted to admit Hallie just to make sure and to get an EEG. And because it was a weekend, their neurologist was not there to do it. Especially because we were going to have to do a very adaptive EEG, because normally they like glue the things to your head, and clearly that was not going to happen. And so we got admitted to the PICU at that point, and we were there for 4 days. I think Monday was when they came in and finally did the EEG, and the woman was so helpful and kind of worked with the neurologist because it was like her tech doing it. And we had this whole thing laid out on how we were going to, I don't even remember what it was, but we had a whole way of doing this adaptively.
yeah.
Was she still having these like spasms throughout this whole time? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
now when
no,
we first got there.
yeah. So they found that her electrolytes were tanked.
Yes.
Basically,
Which he said could cause
seizures.
muscle cramps
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
So they found that out very quickly. So but we still wanted to go forward with the EEG
To make sure. And they started giving her salt.
That was a whole ordeal too, because they couldn't get a vein in her because of how tiny she was and how dehydrated she was. They just couldn't. They poked her everywhere, and they poked her in the head so many times to get this.
They got finally an IV.
They finally did,
head.
but prior to getting that, we had to administer a salt solution
by syringe.
We tried to give it to
in
her
mouth.
in her bottle, and she wouldn't take it
because it's gross.
Yeah, and then I finally had to just squirt it in her.
Oh, she hated it. She hated it.
But they did the EEG. Did I say that right?
Yeah, they did the EEG, and they didn't see any seizure activity. And then I started to notice that she was breathing weird, like kind of retracting breath, and she looked very pale. Her cheeks had grown to immense sizes, which is actually something I've noticed a lot with EB babies, and they are precious. I mean, they just look so edible, but obviously you know that something else is going on. She was super pale, and she was so tired that she actually slept through the IV sticks in her head as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned also her wounds were starting to look different too, right?
Yeah. So actually in the beginning of the hospital stay, her wounds had started to look better, which we were like excited about. Wound care came up. I should also mention the whole time she was in the hospital, everyone had to go through us before they touched her. There was one time a nurse tried to do something and Joe lunged down her throat. Basically.
I was nice about it. I said, but I didn't yell.
You didn't yell, but you were definitely like, get off my kid. Like, no. We were her strongest advocates and no one could touch her without doing anything through us. But we did notice that her wounds had started to look good. We had wound care come up who knew her at this point and looked and was like, oh yeah, they're looking good. I'm seeing some like fresh healing, all this stuff. So at the end of the hospital stay, no seizures. They figured out it was electrolytes. We were giving her salt. We had called CHOP in Philadelphia and were scheduled to have a G-tube placed for nutrition on that Thursday. So this was a Tuesday at this point. They were going to schedule her Thursday. So we were actually going to drive her up on Wednesday as a family. So I asked them if there was anything I needed to know about her breathing. They did a chest x-ray. They said everything looked okay. We were cleared to take her home. So we took her home that Tuesday night, which would have been September 7th.
So, well, actually, right before we took her home, we did, I think, one more diaper change.
Is that when we noticed it?
And her poop looked not normal. Very yellow,
Oh, yeah,
very mucusy, just not. And we tried to we asked someone to come in.
Yeah. I
And
forgot that part.
they more or less said it was fine. They
didn't know.
But
She also had to have a blood transfusion while she was there.
Oh, did she?
Yes.
Do not remember that.
Yeah. See, this is also good here because we both have like different
Did
things.
she really?
Yeah, she did. We had to wait like 4 hours for the blood to get there. It was a whole thing. Anyway, we took her home that Tuesday afternoon. She was so pale and like breathing weird. I actually had texted some nursing friends to be like, can you listen to her breathing? And they were like, well, if you're concerned, take her in tomorrow. You know, they did a chest x-ray. Like everyone was so nice, but you know, it just didn't seem right. Something just wasn't right. And so she did spend her final night at home with us. I got some good pictures. We actually held her a lot that night until bedtime. And we did not do safe sleep practices with her because she would, like, you had to cushion her. I mean, it just was, she was going to wake up with blood everywhere if you didn't.
Yeah, we at one point, but just in her life, we had to elevate her up.
Yeah.
Like she slept in the boppy pillow.
Yeah.
At one point, that was all she did was sleep. Like when it was bedtime, we'd take her back and she slept in a boppy pillow, which you're not supposed to.
Which is not, I mean, it's horrible, but it was like.
But if she was laying on her flat on her back, it was just miserable for her.
And she would wake up bloody, and it was, anyway. So that night we took her back and she slept in a halo bassinet next to me. And somehow I slept, which is the one thing that I regret probably in my whole life, is that I slept that night. I've had a lot of people say, you know, your body knew that you were going to need the energy for the next day, or Hallie would have wanted you to sleep or whatever. But in my mind, she was dying next to me and I didn't know it. And so I just beat myself up about that. So we're going to bypass that real quick. The next morning we woke up and she actually seemed slightly better. And Dr. Winley called to check in on us. And I said, I think she seems a little better. And Dr. Winley said, is she better or is she tired? And I said, oh my God, I don't know. And she said, I need you to take her to the ER right now. And so we rushed and we did a final bandage change because we were thinking we were going to be readmitted to the hospital. And so the idea was that we were going to give her fresh bandages because it had been a couple of days. And that was when we opened up her bandages and her wounds at that point were black. I'd never seen it like that before. And that was when we rushed faster and sent Brielle to our neighbor, who I will be forever grateful to.
And I had called my parents that morning and had them drive down from Charleston. So as we're trying to get out the house, my parents pull up right behind me. And I was like, you got to go, move out the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
and my dad didn't quite understand the level of urgency.
And so we threw her in the car, and I think Joe blazed over to the hospital, which is about 15 minutes from our house. And I remember texting my therapist in tears, and I believe we saw a rainbow on the way to the hospital, or she texted me that she saw a rainbow.
She had saw a rainbow that day or something.
And said, I think this is a good sign, and like trying to be there for me. And so we got to the hospital and signed her in, and I was like shaking at this point. And they triaged her and did her vitals and all that. And one lady was like, I don't think the machine's working, because her heart rate was like 60, but they claimed it was just the machines. And so we went and sat in the waiting room for all of like 2 minutes. And then luckily they got us right back. And I had just taken her out of her car seat and put her on the hospital bed in the children's ER. And I had my hand on her chest. And that's when the doctor walked in behind me and asked what was going on. And so I turned to talk to the doctor and removed my hand. And as soon as I removed my hand, she coded. And then for 45 minutes, it was hell. We stayed in the room. Chaplain asked us if we wanted to leave. There was no way. You were pulling me out of that room. We had an amazing nurse who literally threw us into the corner so we wouldn't see much because we already had seen too much. And I won't even tell you what we saw. But they threw us into the corner and she literally like hugged us so that we couldn't see what was going on. And she narrated everything we were hearing calmly. I was praying, but mostly saying the lyrics of the song Oceans by Hillsong out loud into the space. Joe was inconsolable. We heard and saw things that we should never, ever see or hear. And then about 45 minutes in, maybe 30 minutes, I don't even know, a long time, finally a doctor came over and said, your daughter is not going to survive this event. And so I made the decision to stop. And originally Joe did not like that, but then eventually realized that that was the right thing to do. And so we asked them to wrap her in this beautiful bamboo swaddle that we had brought her in that had butterflies on it. It was gray with like pink and blue butterflies. We still have it. And they set up the song Oceans on the nurse's phone and basically let us hold her, and they took pictures for us. For 4 hours, we stayed with her. And both sets of our parents got to come and say goodbye. And it was the first time in her whole life that we got to squeeze her.
And to clarify for people watching this whole time, she's gone by this point, right? And she was gone from the moment you took her hand off of her. They were trying to do life-saving efforts, but she wasn't responding, correct?
She wasn't responding. They were able to get a small pulse back, but it was like in the 40s at that point. I called on my brother because, for those who don't know, my brother passed from cancer when he was 3 years old and I was 7. And so I called on him to meet her. And I think he did. And the one thing I would say, through the tears, obviously, for me, in that moment when I prayed, not only did I feel Hallie's presence in the room, I felt my brother's presence in the room. I felt God's presence in the room. And I felt the peace beyond all understanding that people talk about all the time. Like, I was so calm.
Yeah.
I was so calm. It's still weird when I think back on it. I'm like, my kid was literally dying in the room, and I was like the calmest I've ever been. But I know it's because I knew I was surrounded with her and she was okay. And I don't feel it now. I wish I could have like held on to that feeling forever. But in that moment, like, I knew she was where she needed to be. And so I cling to that now. And she did give us one final gift. It was so special. So she lost her smile right after my birthday. My birthday is August 21st. The last time we saw her smile was August 22nd. And so I really missed her smile. And when she first passed in the room, she looked not great. I mean, it was really awful to see your child look like that. But over the 4 hours of holding her, her face changed. Her eyes closed, her mouth opened to the biggest smile, and it looked like she was the most at peace. It was like, I just felt like she was looking into the face of her creator. Like, I have pictures that I don't share, obviously, because these are just family, but I have pictures of when she first died, and I have pictures towards the end, and it's just night and day miraculous. And I feel like that was her like really big final gift, to let us know that she was comfortable again and she was happy and she was still with us. So September 8th, 2021, worst day ever. It did pour rain. And so rain always reminds us of Hallie. It always poured whenever we went to the doctor with her, when she came home from the hospital, when she died, her funeral.
It rains on her birthday.
It rains on her birthday. We always see rainbows associated with her.
I just told you before this call, it rained so hard here at my house that the rain was pounding on the glass. I was like, what is happening? And it only lasted for 5 minutes and then it stopped. Maybe that was Hallie.
That's Hallie. Too. It rained here. We had a memorial. So we had two things for her. We had an actual funeral at our cathedral in Savannah where she was baptized.
Poured that day.
When we've actually buried her and all that. But then we also had a memorial service in our backyard. And it was supposed to rain that day. And so we got like tents to put up and all this stuff. And it was absolutely beautiful. It was in October. It was absolutely beautiful until literally we said, okay, thank you all for coming. It was live stream. So I turned off the live stream and it sprinkled just where we were standing.
Oh, wow.
I mean, everybody was like, no freaking way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you saw the rainbow at the butterfly release.
I did. A triple rainbow.
Rainbow. Yeah. So, I mean, she shows up. Hallie shows up. I know she's okay. We had prayed. We had thousands of people praying to heal her. And she was healed. She just wasn't healed in the way that we would have wanted. And obviously, we will spend every day for the rest of our lives missing our kid who is right there over my shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's change the tone a little bit. Let's talk about, sorry, only because I don't want to make you cry this whole time.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Let's talk about at what point did Heroes for Hallie Grace start, and what made you go, there needs to be an organization that does XYZ, and what is the XYZ that Heroes for Hallie Grace does?
So after Hallie died, she had a fairly big online following, nothing quite like Ellie, but for only being 3 months along we had about 5,000 people, I think, that were following her at the time, and from across the globe. And one of the things that people did that warmed our hearts and brought us comfort was to send us little trinkets or cards. It didn't have to be anything expensive. It honestly was just knowing that she was remembered that meant the world, and still to this day means the world. Like, honestly, if someone just sends me a picture of a butterfly and says, hey, I'm thinking of Hallie, like, that's everything we need. But I started to realize in the EB community that not everyone had such a following. And my heart broke at the thought of anybody going through this level of pain and not thinking that their person mattered. And so it started by us wanting to send memorial boxes to those who passed in the EB community. And then it kind of grew into wanting to help raise money and awareness and all the things. So we actually became an official 501c3 in March of 2022. So just months after, she passed. And I wasn't sure I wanted to do it, but I think we just kind of were led that way. We were going to have the butterfly ball, and we decided that that was the best way to do it so that people could have tax deductions if they donated and all that stuff. And so we created Heroes for Hallie Grace. And we have learned a lot along the way.
That first ball, Ann did in 3 months.
Yeah.
Somehow.
I got the idea in a shower. Well, I did it with the help of the Savannah community.
Well,
I mean, there's no other way.
Yes.
A lot of our wedding vendors, because we got married here before we moved here, a lot of our wedding vendors became good friends. And so they stepped up in big ways and helped us put on an event like I had never put on before. And that first year we were able to raise almost $18,000, which I was expecting 10. And so essentially what we do is every year around what would be her birthday, So the first Friday in June, we always have the butterfly ball. This year was the 4th annual, so she would have been 4. And we essentially raise money for our missions and our initiatives. And those would be raising awareness, funding research. And the way that we do that is by partnering with Deborah, EBRP, and EBMRF. So we actually donate large chunks of money to them each year, whatever we can do based on fundraising. And then also just, I think our niche for Heroes is connecting with and helping members of the EB community any way we can. So memorial boxes come into play. We now do butterfly bundle welcome boxes for new babies. We do what we call the Wings of Care initiative, and that's where if anyone in the EB community needs something to help make them more comfortable, like I see Jordan on here, so we just sent a wagon to Tova, and we've sent like a tent to Rookie. And sometimes we've helped, just pay for different things that they might need, like an esthetician chair to do bandage changes in, or, whatever it might be. So that's kind of more up in the air and based on need. And then we also have started to work with the community as a whole and create educational stuff so that hopefully we can go to some conferences and talk with pediatric dermatologists, nurses, hopefully NICU at some point, OBs, ER, and just kind of talk about what EB is and what to do. But that wouldn't come just from our family, because obviously we need a lot of different perspectives to create that. I will say with the boxes, it's the thing I'm most proud of. Like, our initiatives with the boxes and the Wings of Care is the thing I'm most proud of. And I also work full time and do this on the side and have 2 young children. And so for anyone who is getting a box or has gotten a box or is still waiting on a box, sometimes it takes me a little bit longer, but it's also because I hand curate it. I do it all myself. I order things personalized, and I really want to get to know that person and the family. I don't want it to just be like oh, you order a box, someone's thinking of your person. It's more like I'm getting to know that person and that family so that they know that that person is then forever going to live in our hearts along with theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions here that were submitted beforehand. So one of them was, is there anything that people said or did that helped you during the hardest months? Or were there, on the opposite end, is there anything that people have said or done that hurt, even though they were probably well-intentioned?
I'm gonna start with this one. So I do not like to ask for help for almost anything unless I know that I just can't do it. If I feel like there's a chance that I can do it, no, you're not helping me, I'm doing it.
He's very stubborn that way.
Same.
But our neighbors were so great.
Yes.
They had our grass cut while Hallie was alive, and even a few weeks after the fact. Just so that's not something I had to worry about. They didn't even ask me. They just did it. They just started. Yep, cut the grass.
And someone got us a house cleaner.
Yeah, house cleaner was really helpful. People just dropping off food for a while.
Or like meal trains.
Right. That was really helpful, because that's the last thing that, we want to worry about is, oh, who's cooking dinner tonight, or what are we going to order for food? Gift cards for food was also really helpful during that time.
And then I think just the little like cards and care packages. I will say we did not stay at our house for at least 2 weeks after. We stayed with my parents because we just couldn't be here. So I think immediately after, you want to make sure that, whoever it is home because they may not. We left it like a time capsule. And then people did actually offer to help us kind of clear things out. We personally didn't want that, but it is an offer that some people do appreciate. And so I think it just it's not a harmful ask. And then in terms of things that were said or done, I think the intentions are so good, but I tell this to people all the time. Really, there's no use for the words at least in these kinds of situations ever. Like, I can't think of a single reason to ever say the term at least, because there is no at least.
Yeah. At least you got 3 months with her or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. At least you have another living child.
Mm.
Right. At least you know you can get pregnant. At least all these things.
Mm-hmm.
No, at least. No, just or only. It's very invalidating and dismissive. Some of these things not those, but I used to say to people, I can't imagine. You can imagine, you just don't want to. And so instead of saying something like that, I would say something like, I'm here if you need to talk. I can sit on the phone with you in silence. Like the I can't imagine is kind of distancing from people and makes them feel a little bit.
I think I probably said that on this call, so I'm very sorry for saying.
I don't actually think you did, but if you did, I didn't notice, probably because I'm very used
I can't imagine not saying it, because I think I probably say it all the time, honestly.
I used to say
because it is hard to fathom, and I don't mean it in an
know.
invalidating way, but it is hard. And
Sure.
I think, but also at the same time, you're right, because the whole reason Eliana's Army exists is because a massive number of people put ourselves in her shoes because she did such a good job documenting the life. And so we could imagine, and we all sobbed for days and weeks and months and still sob. And it feels like, wait, why am I sobbing for a child I never met? And so you're right, we can imagine. And that is why
it's just the worst thing, and parents don't want to imagine it. And like, I get it. So again, I don't ever think of that as like rude or whatever. It's just lonely. It's just lonely. It puts like a divide. The "you're so strong" irritates me, because I'm like, well, I have to be, and anybody would have to be in my situation. I'm not going to say, what's the other option? I had thoughts of the other option, I will tell you. And I'm not alone in that, I know. And the thing that kept me strong is Brielle.
I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I don't remember who it was now, about that same thing. I was like, and I was talking about you, and everyone has told Anne how strong she is and everything, and I was like, well, it's not like she chose to be.
I hate it. I don't want to be this.
You have to be. If everyone can be strong, right?
You do what you have to do,
because you don't have a choice.
So again, I know that that's meant to be a compliment, and it's coming from such a good place, but and
similarly, I've heard people say stuff like, "Oh, if it were me, I just wouldn't survive," or
that was the next one I was going to say.
Yes,
thank you. That was
it drives me nuts, and I'm not a lost mom, but I'm like, what are you implying here? That she should, that they're better off if they killed themselves? Like what?
Right.
Like,
well, and also,
am I not grieving my child enough?
Yes.
Over here?
Right. And to be perfectly honest, part of us didn't survive. That's what I always want to say to people. I didn't survive. Yes, my body is physically here, but emotionally I am not the same. Joe is not the same. We will never be the same. So just, that whole, oh, I wouldn't survive if it was me. Yeah, you have to. It sucks, but you have to. And so, yeah, I don't like that. And there was one other one that came to my mind just now, and I lost it. I can't remember what it is. So if it comes to me, I'll bring it back up. But those were like the big things. The biggest thing that somebody can do, especially if you're close with the person, is literally just sit with them. If, ask first to make sure they're comfortable with it. But I had a friend who came over and literally sat in my living room. This was about a year or so after Hallie died. I was going through some of the clothes that we weren't going to be able to use and donating them or selling them or whatever. And she literally just sat in my living room with me, sunroom actually, as I went through the clothes and let me tell her stories, let me cry if I needed to, also let me not cry or not talk about it if I like. She just kind of let me lead, but she just wanted to be a presence in that space, so I wasn't doing it alone. That stuck with me. That was so massive, because I'm sure that was not comfortable for her. But like, if you're not the lost parent, you don't need to be comfortable if you really care about the person. you know, you show up and you join them in their discomfort so that they're not alone, because otherwise it's loss on loss.
Great. Wow. What would you say to another parent just beginning the journey of loss or facing an EB diagnosis for their child?
Ooh.
Support.
Yeah.
Like just whether you're a new EB parent or you're going through the very beginning of loss, finding some level of support. If it wasn't for Ann, I don't know where I'd be, because I don't reach out for support in my own. So all the support I've gotten has generally been a byproduct of being married to Ann and all the people that she knows and the connections she makes. But support,
which can be typical for men, but not always men, also other people. But yeah, I would agree. I think surrounding yourself with people who get it, or who want to at least join you in the hard. Therapy. I mean, I'm a psychologist, so I have to say it, but I'm also in therapy. I've been in therapy this whole time. I was in therapy since I had Brielle, because I also practice what I preach. And I believe in it. If you find the right match, not all therapists are going to be the right match, and that's okay, but you need to find somebody who matches you and can be that outlet. And honestly, if you're going through loss, that's also trauma. So, you know, consider trauma work specifically, which is what I do. So I always say to people, part of Heroes is that we can help find these things for you. I can look up therapists with people's insurances if they'll share it with me. I can help them figure out what type of therapy is right for them, because I can explain what happens in each one of them since I provide them. I can tell you which one I did and which one I wouldn't do, all those things. But I think that's important. And just self-care, knowing yourself, being willing to say yes or no to things and being okay with that. And then in terms of having a new EB baby, I would say the EB community, it's again support, but like really not being like, don't hold back on reaching out and asking questions and letting us know that you're there, because the community as a whole is so welcoming and so supportive, and they want to be there to answer anyone's questions. Like, I think that we owe them pretty much everything, which is one of the main reasons that we created Heroes for Hallie Grace, was to give back, because I don't know what we would do if if Hallie was born at a time when social media didn't exist and I couldn't find these people. I genuinely don't know what I would have done, or what we would have done.
It would have been a lot harder, that's for sure.
Oh, it would have been. So
I just spoke with someone the other day who, she had 2 EB babies in the 80s, and I know you're friends with her, but you know, and I was like asking, well, what did you do? I mean, there weren't Facebook groups to go out and find, you know, how did you how did you survive? I hope I didn't. No, but I can't imagine what it's like trying to find information in the age without internet. And
seriously though, I know. I mean, she's an incredible person.
Yeah,
she is. But yeah.
So can we share real fast? Okay, so you had Brielle, and then you had Hallie. You have Evan. So this is the number one question that people ask me on the side about Hannah, as if I'm gonna just like spill her secrets or whatever. But like, so I know everyone has these questions for all EB families. Okay, you had an EB baby, you lost your EB baby. You want to expand your family, or maybe you don't want to expand your family, but you have a baby. So how did Evan come to be?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So Evan came to be, I'm going to say this short and then I'm going to go a little bit long. Evan came to be, I can say this in one sentence, through God and Hallie Grace, period. Our specific, so we, like I said, we were older parents. We weren't sure that we were going to have more than one child anyway. After we lost Hallie, I really wanted another kid, but we had talked about IVF, and with my health and age and our finances and all that, it just wasn't an option for us. It's a fabulous option for some families, and they have had great success, and I cheer them on the whole way. It just wasn't right for us. We also knew that we were not willing to take the risk in natural pregnancy. Again, that is everyone's personal decision, and we do not judge if that is what they want to do. Because for each pregnancy, you have a 25% chance that that baby will be affected with junctional, because they have to get both mutations. With recessive dystrophic EB, you have a 50% chance, essentially. This is an overgeneralization or oversimplification, but you get my meaning. So we decided we were not going to try to get pregnant. We were not going to do IVF. Hallie had just passed in September of 2021. We had barely skimmed the surface of a conversation of maybe one day we'll think about adoption. That was where we were at. In November of that year, so literally 3 months after she died, 2 months after she died, can't do math, 2 months after she died, I had a friend over here who was just kind of updating me on her life. She had come to see us to see if we were okay, which is lovely. And she said that she was dating someone named Evan. And as soon as I heard the name, I was like, oh, I love that name. You know, when we thought Brielle was going to be a boy originally, we like couldn't come up with a boy name we liked. It was just so hard, whatever. And I just was like, oh, I like the name Evan. And so I looked it up, and it means God is gracious. And so I thought, oh, Hallie Grace, that would be such a perfect name for a little boy, because it would incorporate Hallie's name without being like too spot on and, you know, all the things. And then later that night, we watched the new Matrix movie. It was new at the time. Matrix movie. And Keanu Reeves' character was Evan. And so twice in one day, I heard the name and I thought, that's weird. Maybe when we adopt, we'll adopt a little boy and we'll name it Evan. And I told Joe that night, he's like, okay, you know, like just whatever. So then we were not trying to get pregnant, like I said. That next March, Brielle turned 3. And 3 is Hallie's number for anyone who doesn't know. She was 3 months and 3 days old and all the things. 3 just always comes up with her. And so the night before Brielle's 3rd birthday, I was not feeling well and I was very late. And I was like, Joe, and I should mention we were sleeping out in our sunroom because the guilt that I had that Hallie died next to us, we couldn't sleep in our bedroom for over 6 months. And we actually had to change out our entire bedroom set to even get back in there. But so we were sleeping on the couch, like head to head. It's like a L-shaped couch. And I said, Joe, I'm really late. And he was like, there's no way. And I was like, I know, right? There's no way. I mean, there's no way. We're in our 40s. Like we can't. He's like, yeah. So then I said, do we even have a pregnancy test? And he's like, I don't think so. I said, we might have one back there. So he went and looked and it was expired. And so we're like, oh, probably not the best.
We're going to do it anyways.
So we went to bed. I actually dreamed that I was pregnant, which has only happened 2 other times. And so I woke up on Brielle's 3rd birthday and was so sick. And I was like, oh my God, there's no way. But I had dreamed it and I just had this thought. And so I took her to pre-K. My mom had come over that day because my mom comes every Tuesday, Wednesday to help with the kids. So she was over and I had driven, I think my mom had come with me to drop off Brielle at pre-K. And on the way back, I was like, I got to go to urgent care, Mom. Like, I'm so dizzy. I don't feel good. And urgent care was like right there. My mom's like, sure. So we go in and the nurse is like, could you be pregnant? I said, no. And she's like, really? And I said, well, I mean, there's like a small chance. She's like, just pee in a cup. And I was like, fine. So pee in a cup. Really nice doctor comes in. My mom's in the room with me. And I am sobbing because I'm terrified. Sobbing. And he's just standing there like listening to my whole story. I tell him all about Hallie and how I can't be pregnant and all these things. And he's listening and I'm thinking he doesn't have the results, but he did. And suddenly I stopped talking and he looks at me and goes, well, you're very pregnant.
Just like, not even a gentle way. Like, not going to happen again, but.
No, he literally was like, you're very pregnant. I was like, what? You know, just more waterworks. I called Joe at work. He's with a customer. He's like, can I call you back? I was like, no. But no, yes, I guess. I don't know. So he calls me like a couple minutes after. I'm telling him in the room. The doctor very kindly says, there's a 75% chance this baby's okay. I'm going to need you to cling to that. And so I did. I actually went and got confirmation blood work done, I think the next couple of days. And there was this amazing woman who was not supposed to be working there that was registering me for the blood work. And she sits me down and she says, how are you? And I said, I'm all right. I think I'm pregnant, so I don't feel very good. And she goes, I just need to tell you the baby's going to be fine. And I just looked at her and was like, what? And she's like, I just need to tell you, something in my head is telling me that I need to tell you the baby's going to be fine. And so then, of course, I sob and tell her everything about Hallie, and she prayed over the baby and everything. And I clung to that 75%. And so we tried to do a placenta biopsy. My body was not positioned correctly to do it because that's the earliest way to test for EB. They
How
can
far
test.
along can you be for the placenta test?
I think it starts at 11 weeks. Before that, you can have the blood draw, but if it's not a boy, they're going to just pick up on your own cells. Like there's no way to, so, my mutation would show up regardless, essentially. There are a couple companies out there, but it's like you have to pay an exorbitant amount of money. And I think they still can't quite figure out how to separate from the mother.
Mm.
So you have to do something more invasive in order to really know, if you so choose. Like some people choose not to know, and that's also okay, but we wanted to know. And so I tried that, couldn't do it. So they were going to do an amniocentesis, and the earliest you can do that is 15 weeks. So we came in at 15 weeks, went back and forth. I was terrified because the placental thing was very, very painful for me. It's not a pleasant experience. And so we ended up doing that and had the best doctor get me through it. Joe prayed over me the whole time. I held a picture of Hallie on my phone and just looked at her and tried to gather strength from her. And then it took exactly 21 days to get the results. So by the time we got the results, I was 17 or 18 weeks. And we were having the first ball about, 10 days before that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to hide my pregnancy because we didn't
there
know
was
what was happening.
There was a chance that you would get the results before the ball,
but it did
didn't
not
come
happen. And I was dying to know. And so I wore this poofy dress so no one could tell. And we made up a non-alcoholic version of our signature drink so I could still appear as though I was drinking so that no one would be the wiser. Although I think some people did figure it out. But we finally got the call 21 days after, which if anyone's doing math, that's 3 weeks. Exactly. And I saw the number flash on my phone, and it was an Augusta phone number, so 706. I still remember it. The woman's name was Vicky, and she said, hi, I'm the geneticist calling from this hospital, blah, 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 and I have good news. And I just almost dropped the phone, bawled into the phone, and luckily Joe was home, and so I ran into the office here and was telling him, and she's still on the phone listening to all of this. And we found out basically Evan carries Joe's mutation, but he does not carry mine. And so he will not be affected unless he decides to have a baby, and then his partner would have to get tested to see what, but that's many, many years from now. And so then we had him in November of 2022, which is interesting because I heard the name Evan in November of 2021. Mm-hmm. We had him in November of 2022. And doctors were literally scrubbing his skin to make sure that everything was okay. And I don't think we believed it for the first month, at least.
Well, I believed it, but I was nervous that it was just going to somehow show up.
I was terrified. I didn't believe it. But anyway, he ended up being fine. He doesn't have anything EB-esque. He has a little bit of, skin stuff, which we think might be related to Joe's mutation, but nothing dangerous. And he is a precious 2.5-year-old boy.
That's a mama's boy right there. He loves his mama.
Mama hold you.
Mama hold you. Mama hold you.
Yeah, he loves you. It's so cute.
Oh, I love him too.
Let me just also say that until we found the results, that was the most nerve-wracking experience because it just having this unknown feeling of well, will the baby have EB? Will the baby not have EB? And hopefully this doesn't offend anybody, but if it does, I'm sorry. But we were trying to figure out what to do because, we know what happens when you have an EB baby, and we know that we would not wish that on any child.
Or Brielle again.
Or Brielle again.
I mean, we had
right?
it was terrifying.
So it was just a very nerve-wracking experience. I mean, I even had a thought, and I think I shared it with you, but I was like, well, you know what? The baby has EB, we know what to do, and we could beat it.
Oh yeah.
There
he got like he was gonna prove it.
Like I had this moment. I was like, okay, well, we'll just do things like we know what to do now, and we'll just have a much better experience.
You can't beat it.
But that was just.
As you've already said, no two EB babies are the same. So even your diaper changing system probably wouldn't have worked for another.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Luckily, we did not have to worry about it. And Evan is here, and I see Hallie and him often.
Mm-hmm.
And he, ever since he was little, has pointed to her picture. One of the first things he ever said was Angel. He will say, like, I have a pillow of her, and he'll grab the pillow and say, Hallie, sissy Hallie, and he'll squeeze it. So I really feel like all three of our kids are always going to be bonded, even though he didn't meet her this side of heaven. I believe wholeheartedly that she hand chose him for our family. And so we thank God every single day for all three blessings that we got.
So to wrap up, can you tell us any, obviously you have an entire organization after your daughter, but what other little traditions or things do you do to keep her memory alive within your family?
Well, she's everywhere in the house.
She's everywhere in the house. We have like an 8x11 wooden picture.
Yes.
That we take her picture everywhere, and she is in every family photo
that we can
get her in.
Yep.
And
I don't care if people think it's weird.
We make it uncomfortable for people. Hold on, we need to get our other daughter, and they're like, where? And we pull a picture out.
Yep.
But
they'll ask us, is she just at home? And we'll say, no, she died.
Yeah.
And but she's still a member of our family. And so whoever doesn't like it, whatever. We do that. We have a tree full of butterfly ornaments that's lit up all year.
Yep.
Like a birch tree in our house. We have a flag outside our house with her face. We do a stocking project every Christmas where we ask people to send her letters. And then on Christmas, not Christmas Eve, but Christmas night, so the night of Christmas, after the kids go to bed, we actually sit in the room together with the tree and we read them all out loud to her. And I believe she hears those. So we do that. We have a safe full of her stuff, like a literal safe, like fireproof, waterproof safe, because I'm not losing any of that. We talk about her all the time.
We try. We didn't do it this year.
Oh, we do Hallie flies too.
Yeah. But we try, and on her birthday, we try and go to Publix or somewhere and try and buy somebody a birthday cake. Like whoever
last
ordered
year they wouldn't let us.
Interesting.
Which is weird. I was so mad. I cried about it. But we do try and gift somebody something. We do a lot of random acts of kindness. And then we have these little butterfly garden stakes that we call Hallie flies. And people all over the world have made them and send us pictures. And it has a little business card size thing of information about her and EB. And they plant them at all these different places. So we have one with the London Eye in the background, or we have one at the Grand Canyon that was planted. We've got one on beaches and stuff. And so that was a big project. We actually have a map where I've started to map out where they all were, but I know they made it to at least 8 countries and then across the US.
Well, mine's not as exciting, but it's right there in my front yard, and I see it every time I walk out my front door.
That is so exciting.
That's so good.
So I think about her every time I leave my house.
That's all we need. I think if you would ask most lost parents, and again, this is everyone's choice. Sometimes people don't want to hear about it because it's too hard, and that is fine. But if you ask and somebody says they just want you to remember their kid, that's literally it. Anytime somebody says, hey, can I include Hallie in this? Yes, and thank you for asking. I love that. That just lightens my heart, because it's the weight of having to keep your child alive in memory only is something that some parents carry all by themselves.
Yeah.
And that
It's
is
got to be really hard when your daughter was only 3 months old.
Yeah.
I mean, because you just barely get to personality by the age of 3 months. So,
and a lot of people didn't get to meet her in person. So it's like easier to not think about, or, you know, except we don't allow that to happen.
Yeah. Well, we've been going a long time, and I appreciate you guys talking all this. And thanks everyone for joining us today.
Yeah.
And for anyone who didn't hear at the very beginning, I've got a link in the chat to the t-shirts that we're featuring this month for Hallie Grace on our store. So please feel free to take a look at those. And then, like I said, I will compile this interview and put it up on our socials so you'll be able to share too. And happy to share an edit of it for you to share on Hero's page if you'd like.
Yeah.
And yeah,
if it's not too much on your plate.
Yeah, does anybody have any final questions? You can put them in the chat and we can ask. I think we've done a really good job covering a lot of stuff. And I can sit here and talk to you guys for another 3 hours, to be clear.
I'm gonna add one more thing. So we always love to talk about our story, but we have a podcast.
Oh yeah.
Our podcast has a lot more information about our story. Dee would be so mad if I didn't say anything.
It's a really good podcast with really awesome producers.
So we had so there's a couple specific episodes with me and everything that from my perspective and from Anne's perspective, and we've had doctors on.
We've had people talk about grief and therapy and child life specialists.
Other people with EB.
Yeah, lots of other stories.
Other families.
I just put the link to it in the chat, the Grace, Grief, and Grit.
Yes. Grace, Grief, and Grit. And, you know, we will continue to have more EB families on to share their stories as well, because we want to really have that be kind of a voice for the community. Yeah.
Thank you, Jordan.
Oh, thank you, Jordan. I'm so glad you were here.
I can't wait to have your night, Jordan. Be prepared to talk for hours.
And I'm going to be here for it too.
Yeah.
Joe and I will show up.
Yeah.
Because we want to hear. Plus, Jordan and I are going to meet soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, I'm sure I'll text you in 5 minutes with another question. So.
That's good.
Okay.
All right. Bye.